This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Still under quarantine, and it looks like we'll be that way for the entire month of April. Hopefully with better testing, hopefully with some therapeutics, and hopefully for just a dire economic necessity, we can all get back to work in May. But the good part about running and working at a remote company is that there's no disruption for us, although I do miss going outside from time to time. But the farm is quite nice, so it's good to survive. It is March 31st, and this is a big milestone for us. This is the first time we did a product update live. There were 7 people who participated on our side, all product managers and Tim. And it was great. I think we had at least 700 or 800 concurrent people. A lot of good questions, good chat, well moderated. Crowdcast is a great platform. I'm very happy with it. And I'm really glad that many of you attended it. But you'll notice something. I wasn't there. This was a great opportunity for the product team to showcase what they're doing and actually have their time in the spotlight. So they covered a lot of ground. They covered the Byron Reboot, which is out. It's coming out today, and all throughout the week, stuff related to it's going to be releasing. So things like a command line client, things like Daedalus Flight, talked about what Daedalus Flight is all about. You guys are also going to start getting bi-weekly updates on Daedalus Flight, just like we're doing ITN updates. So if you miss those ITN updates, now you get Daedalus updates. And covered Hydra, talked about a variety of different things. So it's about an hour long. And I will put in the show notes and the video notes, the link to that Crowdcast recording. This is not a one-off event. This is going to be something we do every month. And you guys can directly participate. You can ask questions. Those questions will be remembered. So even if they don't get answered in the live cast itself, we will make an effort to answer them either in my AMAs or blog posts or in future events. It's very important that we make these events as interactive as possible, and that you guys have a great opportunity to spend some time basically thinking about things, asking things, answering things. And so please do attend them if you can make them. They're scheduled events. My events are spontaneous. We just kind of pop out of the ether. These are scheduled events, and we'll let you know at least a week beforehand. So if you miss this one, that's okay. Every month hereafter, it's going to be there as long as we're working on Cardano. Hopefully that's a very, very long time. Now, yesterday, I did a video to start the conversation about expectation management. As I mentioned, when we originally signed up to work on Cardano in 2015, the problem with a tight scope was that there were just too many unknowns. We didn't know what accounting model we were going to use, how the network stack was going to work. We didn't know if it was going to be proof of work or proof of stake. So it was really difficult to write detailed specifics. Rather, it was saying it's a two-phase project. One is a broad scientific exploration, which will result in a collection of protocols that will allow us to construct a best-in-class cryptocurrency that's truly competitive for that market. And then 2 is the execution of that using principles. So what I was trying to do in the video was kind of scope out what we are delivering and will get done and will not leave until it's absolutely done. And then what we term to be CCCI, which is an endless river. It's something that is necessary for that time. So things that are commercially critical in 2020 will be different in 2025 and different in 2030. And there's always more to do. The point is that it's a single vendor to get a foundation, and that's us. And we're going to stick around until that foundation's built. And then it's 1,000 ships when you get to CCCI, because we all have different opinions. We all have different approaches. We all want to make money. So everybody's chasing that value that the platform is creating. Just like Apple, when they created the iPhone, they created a platform. It's a single vendor to get that platform started. But then the App Store is there, and then you have thousands of app developers floating in and building really cool, interesting, fun, exciting things. So that is something that's going to be here in 2030 and 2040, and the same for Android. So it's very important that you develop both sides of your ecosystem, or else you develop monoculture around a single vendor, a single idea set, and then you end up being like Microsoft in the early 2000s and 90s. You become this ossified ecosystem, and if you're lucky enough to get a network effect, you can stick around for a while, but you're not really innovating, you're not improving people's lives, and you're not really making a great experience. So the point of that video was to try to say we are now separating the CCCI from what is in scope for Cardano 2020. And the point about it was that Cardano 2020, what we're doing, that single vendor side, is going to deliver the best-in-class cryptocurrency on market. It's smart contracts, ledger rules that are written with formal semantics. You have the best-in-class network stack, the best programming languages. You have great wallet experience. You have fast sync. You have all these things that are there that really make it a great piece of software. And in particular, what's shipping this month, this upcoming month in April, and rolling all throughout the month is our whole network upgrades, because it takes a lot to get hundreds of thousands of people to do something, is the first reflection of what the final product is going to look like. Byron Reboot is not just a small piece of software. It shares about 80% of the code base that Shelley has, and it's built with evidence-based software techniques. So that is a foundation that we're proud of. That's a foundation that people can easily build on top of, and that's a foundation that will be around for quite some time. So there's no more grand code rewrites, and most things are iterative from here. And the science is all done. We've completely de-risked all the protocols that we want to ship in 2020. At the end of the year, we're going to put together what we accomplished. So we're going to write this gigantic closing document and basically say, here are all the things that we built in a very short period of time. Now, unfortunately, some people in the community, and mostly trolls, but some well-intended people, got very scared, and they said, oh, well, this means that IOHK is leaving and they have no intention to stay. These are commercial activities, and we need a funding source if we're going to continue working on the protocol. We didn't sign up to indefinitely work and go broke making contributions to open source software. But the good news is that the way we constructed things, there is an economic reality where IOHK can stay long-term, if not indefinitely. But this economic reality requires consent of the ADA holders, meaning that at the end of the year, as we close out Shelley and Goguen and Voltaire and the optimizations and clean up whatever needs to be cleaned up and have beautiful documentation, we give you that closing report and we say, this is what 5 years of our time with us starting with a very unclear picture bought you. And here's what we did. And then we say, here's what we'd like to do with another 3 to 5 years and where we can go. And basically that's going to be a big thing. And then we go to the community, we say, all right, let's vote on this. And then the community gets to decide, do they want to go and down that road? And by the way, we've professionalized over the last 5 years. We've gone from 2 people to a company of 200. We've assembled the best brain trust in the world for cryptocurrencies. We now have great product management. We now have good software development processes. As you see Reboot roll out and how quickly Shelley rolls out thereafter and Goguen rolls out thereafter, you'll get a sense of the acceleration velocity and the unique knowledge and capabilities we've gained. So we think we're uniquely suited to be in a good position to make the case that we can do far more with the next 5 years than what we accomplished with the first 5 years, which is already, I'd say, more than any other cryptocurrency project, objectively. And when we write that report, you'll really see it. The amount of work is staggering. And so we'll make that bid, and the community is in the driver's seat, and they get to decide. And if they say, no, we don't want to do that, then we say, okay, that's fair. We'll maybe still stick around for a little bit to make sure a few things get done, but then it's truly an independent, decentralized system, and somebody else will have to step up and maintain it. But we think the most likely outcome is that post-2020, IOHK will still be here. And the only reality where we're not here is if you guys get a better deal from somebody else, a better deal where somebody can offer more for less, a better deal where somebody who's more capable of maintaining the code that we wrote. I can't really fathom that reality given that we're in the best position to execute, but this is not something that should be viewed as an existential threat. It's rather something that should be viewed as the way forward for all cryptocurrencies. These are not cults of personality. These are not beneficent dictators for life. These are not situations where one party gets to decide indefinitely how everything ought to work. If these are truly decentralized systems, these systems must give the people who are building them a democratic mandate to do that. Now, there needs to be checks and balances, and there needs to be proper controls and social structures such that you can vet things and avoid basically a demagogue from overtaking the place. This is why we said evidence-based software. Important that as we get to the end of that road, there be diversity and there be lots of people doing things, and those people don't necessarily have to agree, and in many cases don't necessarily have to like each other. They just have to agree that there's a common good that they're all working towards, and that Cardano as a platform has the right to grow to millions and eventually billions of users. Our recent investments in the University of Wyoming lab, for example, have created a mechanism for a U.S. university to accept ADA to set up a lab. That means that students, groups, professors, and other people can actually independently set up labs without consent. They can just set up a research lab, start working towards the common good for Cardano, and they don't need to coordinate from a central authority. And one of the reasons why CCCI has to be built, not just by IOHK, but by other parties, is this creates a class of infrastructure developers for Cardano who have difference of opinion, who have different approaches, and then they can allow the community to see a plurality of ideas. No matter how good our organization is, it is very important that we have a diverse set of ideas through the ecosystem. And so it's important that that exists and those people are there and they're bidding and fighting. And these debates make us all better. We're not afraid of debate. We're not afraid of differences of opinion. We're not afraid of critics. But it has to be done in the right way. Now, one of the great unfortunate realities of our space is that it does tend to attract a lot of unfair criticism, a lot of FUD, and a lot of economic incentives for people to behave in ways that are counterproductive for an ecosystem to get to where it needs to go. And also people have unrealistic expectations. In 5 years' time, we built multiple companies. We built several 100,000 people floating around knowing who we are. We built a global movement that exists in more than 20 countries. People are naming their kids after our product. They send me pictures of their children who have been named Ada and so forth. We've done a lot, and we've written tons of academic papers, and they're peer-reviewed in major publications. And that's a truly remarkable achievement. But the problem is that we're speaking different languages. So there's the people who tend to be the loudest, tend to be one of the smallest groups, but those are the people who are mostly motivated by money, which is a silly concept because, the whole point of what we're doing is reinventing money. So your motivation ought not to be to get as many US dollars or euros as possible. Your motivation ought to be redefining what the US dollar is, redefining what the euro is. But that group of people, they tend to be very, very loud, and they tend to propagate through many social channels and Reddit and so forth. For example, even in the comments section of my live stream videos, I now have to resort to having live moderators because there's a clique of people who just come into my channels and shitpost. I don't know why they do it. It adds no value to them, no value to us. I don't listen to them. It doesn't impact me at all, but they're there. So the problem with democracy is you cannot allow that small group of people to co-opt the system and steer the system for short-term gain and goals at the expense of the long-term viability of the system. For example, we see people all the time saying, ship Shelley tomorrow, ship Shelley tomorrow. And the reality is, if we wanted to, we could, because the ITN is effectively Shelley. When I said in December, mission accomplished, I don't need to eat my shoe, I wasn't lying, guys. This wasn't a bluff. The ITN is, by all intents and purposes, a stable, resilient cryptocurrency. It has thousands of users. It's being maintained. It has a strong network uptime. We're even seeing guilds form of stake pool operators to optimize. And people are even creating controversies about that. So people are worried about the governance of the ITN. They wouldn't be worried about these things if it was just a plaything testnet that we were throwing away every week. It's a full cryptocurrency. The only reason we didn't launch that as Shelley is we told everybody from the very beginning that we are going to pursue an evidence-based software approach, and here's how we're going to roll these things out. It takes a little bit more time. Now, why do people want us to launch tomorrow? Because they have this belief that if we launch tomorrow, the ADA that they hold will go dramatically up. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't happen, but that's a short-term gain. I'll remind everybody that there was a time not too long ago that Stellar destroyed a substantial proportion of the tokens in circulation through a burn event, and it created a short-term price appreciation. And that price appreciation was completely removed by speculators. So now it's gone. All the value that they gained is gone from that event. And what Stellar effectively did is rob their capacity for years of development, years of stewardship, for a small 20% price appreciation. It doesn't really make a lot of sense strategically. So there's a short-term gain by people who don't give a shit about who we are and what we're doing and where we're going and why we do the things we do, in exchange for robbing years of roadmap development. Doesn't make any sense at all to me. It's just the same with short sellers with Tesla and other people who do that. So as we move towards Voltaire, there's going to have to be a big effort within the community, leaders within the community, people to rise up to help moderate these voices and this noise and make sure that those short-term focus and speculators don't ever co-opt the project and try to steer that project in a direction that will ultimately be its undoing for maybe a week's worth of good trading returns. The reality is that when you build something of a global scale, if we actually pull this off, I have no doubt that ADA will be $1 trillion cryptocurrency. This is not a price speculation. It's just friction and momentum and movement of markets. If you build something with millions to hundreds of millions of users, those people have value. Each person on Facebook provides value. That's the value of that system. Each person using Google has value. And the more they use it, the more interactions they have, the more they do within that system, the more value that they have. And what we are constructing here is an engine over the next 30, 40, 50 years to overtake GovTech, RegTech, FinTech, supply chain technology, a litany of other things. And we're building it in a way that makes it the obvious choice for people in positions of power to say that's the safe platform, because they know it's going to meet their needs. They know it's going to talk to the legacy systems, and it's stable and sustainable. And also it's built in a way that it doesn't blow up in their face. It's reliable. It's bedrock. And furthermore, they all understand it's decentralized and that nobody can control it. And that despite the fact that it's decentralized, it still is reliable in the things that it's doing. Now, if you have a platform like that and you're in the market for a new voting system because nobody can aggregate in large crowds right now, for example, if you're in the market for a new supply chain system because globalization is forcing you to track and trace things and prove that you're sustainable, if you're in the market to issue municipal bonds because your budget's broken and Wall Street's not playing with you, you're going to look for alternatives. And we don't need to win everywhere. We just need to win in a few places, and then suddenly we have hundreds of millions of users. If you have hundreds of millions of users, your network effect is worth billions to tens of billions to hundreds of billions, potentially even trillions of dollars. There is no greater example of this than the recent bailout that the United States government conducted. Out of thin air, they basically created $6 trillion. And I and the rest of the world accept that and will wake up tomorrow and still accept US dollars. We'll still work for it. We'll still build businesses on it. They just printed out of thin air. It's $6 trillion. More money than every president from George Washington to Bill Clinton spent throughout the entire history of the United States. The Apollo program, World War I, World War II. And out of thin air, they just created $6 trillion. And the world accepts it. Now, long-term, perhaps they'll change their opinion. But as it stands right now, that money is just as good today as it was before COVID broke out. So power does not reside with money. Power does not reside with a particular concept. It resides with people, their beliefs, their acceptance of things. So if you build Cardano right, and it becomes an engine that's sticky, and as it gains users, they stay, And as it gains users, they do more and they build more. Then over time, it might take 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, this thing is going to grow to a Leviathan. And it's going to grow to a point where we basically are the world financial operating system. All the social finance, SoFi, is run on our system. The decentralized finance run on our system. GovTech, all your government services, we're the backbone for this, especially in places where governments lack trust and credibility. This is the point of what we've constructed. It's a feedback loop, and one that moves in only one direction, which is growth. And it doesn't matter if our growth rate starts small. As you've seen with COVID, there was one patient in New York at one time. Now look at New York. There was one patient in Italy. Now look at Italy. When you have growth, as long as you're growing, over time it accelerates and the virality spreads, and then you wake up and you have millions to billions of people. The hardest work of Cardano has already been done. Getting it started, getting the philosophy established, incubating it within the academy and keeping it in the academy and keeping that connection forever, and getting to a point where we have a strong community. That's all done. So everything else here is just iterative. And everything else here is about empowerment. It's about bringing a broader community together. So, we have to build an immune system, and we have to be able to purge out these fudsters and these short-term people. And I wish I was a better CEO from time to time. And, the reason why I became a mathematician, not a politician, I don't like people. I love my farm. I love my animals. I love, human interaction. And when people are polite and kind and decent human beings to each other, I'm not like Trump. I can't go and have sharp elbows and deal with constant criticism every day. So the point is, other people have to step up and to deal with that. And I have seen over the last year in particular, especially after we started launching the self-node testnet, the network testnet, and the other testnet, the incentivized testnet, an enormous awakening within our community that has given me absolute certainty that Cardano is here permanently. There's no way to get rid of it. And it's my job to make sure that the foundations of Cardano are so strong that those foundations are perfect for people to invest their time and effort and money into, so that they can build their businesses into. This is really a new world for all of us. We're kind of making up all the new rules as we go along. It's become blatantly clear that the technology of governance and how the world works is not ready for globalization. We're just not ready for it. There are super huge challenges, like just getting people's medical records and verifying that they've been tested for something, credentials on a global basis, the ability to deal with collective action problems, whether it be this recent pandemic or environmental changes or enforcing global environmental standards, because it turns out those factories in China spewing smog clouds, they don't just stay in Beijing, they float over to Japan, they float over to Mongolia, et cetera, et cetera. These problems require people to coordinate, cooperate, and trust each other, even when they're not in a position to explicitly enforce it and people have incentives locally to cheat. So we don't have the governance technology, coordination technology with the legacy systems to resolve these types of collective problems. But we have to solve them, or else the human race is going to burn its way out. So our industry is the solution. It's who we are. It's what we do. And of course, there's going to be skepticism. Of course, there's going to be huge divergence of opinion. And there's going to be a lot of options. But remember, this is exactly the way the world was 150 years ago, when it was going through the same changes with the Industrial Revolution. This was exactly the way the world was as we were moving from theocratic governments led by one voice, one church, to the Enlightenment and to the Reformation, where we started getting rid of this monotheistic theocratic government and moving to a secular enlightened society where we actually separated church and state. And you didn't think there were 100 different ways we could have done that? There were 100 different winners and losers. The point of our movement is to say that now is the time for 1,000 ideas, 1,000 different philosophies. And that's why there's so many cryptocurrencies, why so many different philosophies and approaches. And there will be winners and losers. The ones that win are the ones that focus the most on the fundamentals, the principles, and they hold them deep to heart. Because if you have those fundamentals and those principles, that will always differentiate you and always inspire people to commit and to build and to invest and to believe. For example, Bitcoin will never go away because Bitcoin was true to its principles long enough that it has become an animal that can never violate them. 21 million Bitcoin, never going to be more. You cannot change that monetary policy. You cannot reverse a transaction. Even if the core developers have millions of dollars on a fraudulent exchange and they lose all their money, they would rather go broke and lose millions of dollars than violate or attempt to violate the principles of the system. And even subtle changes can result in religious schisms. So this is the point of where we're going with all of this. And what excites me most about Cardano is that we have laid foundations, in my view, that are just as significant and very different from the foundations of Bitcoin. Whereas Bitcoin was born of the open source movements and the crypto anarchy movements, Cardano was born of the academic movements and of the formal methods community, and a very different kind of engineer, a very different kind of thinker. And ultimately, Cardano was born in a way that really allows it to be as inclusive as possible. Whereas if you look at Bitcoin, it tends to aggregate to an elite meritocratic small group of controllers. And the consensus algorithm tends to aggregate to a small group of people who have invested very heavily in mining. Whereas us, it's very inclusive. So I think we're on much better, more global, more universal foundations and more trusted foundations for long-term growth. It took 5 years, guys, to get that right. If we accomplished anything, the fact that we accomplished that means we're going to be around for a long time. So the reboot is really exciting for me because it means we finally righted the ship and got everything where we needed to go. We learned how to write a cryptocurrency, and we learned how to write not just any cryptocurrency, but one that's going to be around for 50 years. And we're now in a very good position to launch Shelley, in a very good position to launch Goguen, in a very good position to start opening up governance in a way that's productive, that does not allow the system to get co-opted. It's going to have a proper immune system, process over people, and avoid cults of personality. And everything is going to be evidence-based and facts-based. And we're going to have very specific, detailed, collaborative conversations and debates about directions forward. And we won't ever have the Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin block size debate, for example, which was not a facts-based debate. It was more of a giant clash of personalities, and it ended up damaging Bitcoin despite the fact that it was unnecessary. And great people left the Bitcoin ecosystem and went to a different ecosystem because of it. Like, for example, Mike Hearn and Roger Ver and others. We won't ever have that. So things are coming. As we promised, Byron reboot started in March, and there's going to be a release likely today. That announcement will come in a few hours. And throughout this entire month, the first half of this month, we'll be rolling infrastructure out. Getting 100,000 plus people to upgrade is a super difficult thing, especially when there are many languages and many different places. But, it's happening right now live. And then the second half of this month will be consumed a lot with discussions about the first Haskell Shelley testnet. As we mentioned, that Haskell Shelley testnet is about the stake pool operators. Those loyal people have been with us throughout the entire ITN and done great work, and getting their infrastructure migrated over from the Rust side to the Haskell side, and a lot of feedback. We collected almost 300 suggestions for improvements from the community, from the ITN, and there's a huge amount of work that's happening right now to make sure that those improvements, the reasonable ones, work their way into Shelley. And then as that migration occurs, then we start turning on the consumer side of things, which means that all the rewards that you earned on the ITN, we have to verify that they've properly ported over and that you can use the Shelley software. As the reboot shares so much DNA with Shelley, this should be a rather straightforward and easy process, but still needs to be done nonetheless. And then Shelley ships. And then there's this great moment where all of our critics suddenly realize that they've been lying to people for years, and they've attacked our character, our personality. And the first thing they're going to do is deny that we ship Shelley. They'll lie. That's the very first thing they're going to do. And then, of course, they're wrong, and the space will know that they're wrong, and the media will know that they're wrong. And then they'll be immediately then trying to say that somehow what we've shipped is tragically flawed, or doesn't matter because we still have a huge roadmap to deliver. And as they're saying this and rapidly losing credibility, the people who will be attacking them will not be me, will be the stake pool operators and the people delegating and mainstream entities like exchanges and so forth. And then eventually they'll go back into their caves and then they'll be silenced. And then we can get to the business of getting Goguen out, which will happen shortly thereafter. And then people will be issuing assets. They'll be writing smart contracts. Tons of creative people will be building super awesome dApps for our system. And it'll just feel very different. And it's going to be a good time for everybody. I've been looking forward to it for 5 years. But the most meaningful thing to me will be Voltaire as we turn those components on throughout the year to see thousands and thousands of people, eventually tens of thousands, eventually hundreds of thousands of people having productive debates, talking about things, sometimes very specific things, sometimes philosophical things. And then for us to be able to utilize that system to continue working on the system, that's the ultimate mission accomplished. Because it means I could conceivably spend the rest of my life working on Cardano. And we can conceivably, as an organization, spend hundreds of millions, eventually billions of dollars of capital to build something for the entire world and never pursue a patent, never pursue proprietary software, not have to build in a predatory business model where I get to know all your data and sell it to God knows who, not spy on you. Rather, I can do something pure and still maintain a large company and employ hundreds, eventually thousands, eventually tens of thousands of people. This is something that's just so exciting. And this year, those foundations will be laid, and we'll actually have a chance to go and pursue that. And if we succeed, then others will try to copy and emulate that, because when people see money, they chase it too. So we're not saying be altruistic. We're saying greed is now aligned with human progress. Greed is now aligned in a way that will actually make the world better. I often say about alternative energy, the minute that you get solar and wind to be cheaper than coal, you don't really have to make the argument that this is the good environmentally friendly thing to do. People will make policy decisions and say, why the hell am I building a more expensive thing? I'm going to build the less expensive thing. So greed will compel people to actually move in that direction. And that direction happens to be the right direction, the direction for the world. And similarly, this is what we're chasing, to create incentives and momentum and feedback loops towards a system where the most profit is made by decentralization, not centralization. If we achieve this, then it's game over for the legacy world. It's game over for all these governments. It's game over for all these people. You're basically telling people, don't make money. How's that work for the war on drugs? How's that work for anything? If there is a profit to be made, millions of people will chase it. And it's really morally hard to fight the things that we're trying to do. Putting you in control of your identity, putting you in control of your data, putting you in control of your privacy, putting you in control of your money, putting you in control of your vote, putting you in control of your property rights. Who doesn't want to live in a world where they have the option to own these things, and when they give these things to someone else, they give it with terms and conditions, and they can revoke that person's control and access? We live in an age where the minute a crisis happens, people try to take all your power from you. Recently in Hungary, for example, they've given emergency powers to the leader. And now if you apparently criticize the government, you can spend years in jail. If you violate quarantine, 8 years in jail. And now they have a dictator for at least this time period. Why do we want to live in a world where this happens? Because crises can be manufactured. We want to live in a world where our principles and our rights are protected, regardless of the ephemeral events of the time, whether it be a depression, a plague, or a war. There are some absolutes you cannot violate, and human beings cannot be trusted to enforce them. You have to trust things beyond humans. In the absence of having a God, we need something else. And in this case, it's code. That's what this movement's basically all about. So it's a good day for me. And it's a good day for IOHK. It's a great day to ship the Byron reboot. And April is going to be our most productive month we've ever had as a company. March was our most productive month. Now April is going to supersede that. We continue writing software at a blinding pace. Our people are working together at a blinding pace. And now you're getting regular updates from not just me, but from our product team. And those live updates will grow larger and larger. They'll get more and more participation. And you're starting to see the full force and the full power that is IOHK. A lot of cool things are coming, like we'll talk about the hard fork combinator. That's cool. And talk about things we did for Windows and Haskell and write some blog posts about that. And every little delicate detail, those small details, things you don't see, we will make sure to talk about and release. But that is not going to slow down. It's only going to speed up. Our critics will eventually be righted and put in their place and lose all credibility. And people will remind them even years from now the positions they took and the things that they said. So I truly feel sorry for them because they're going to take a big reputational hit from the things that they've said and done. And some of them, there's no place in hell hot enough or deep enough for them to be put. And that's fine. But that's not what this is about. What it's about is getting this done. So we're here to win it. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Crowdcast today. And as I mentioned, I'll put it in my show notes. And all throughout the month of April, a lot of cool things are coming. And I'm going to be so excited to see Shelly come. As I mentioned, we're going to do a huge virtual event for Shelly. And this quarantine has the unexpected consequence that perhaps our attendance will be quite large. I'd love to see 50,000 or 100,000 people. So we're trying to find a service that could potentially scale up to that much. A lot of marketing assets are coming as well. We've been firing on all cylinders there and trying to create a lot of clarity and simplicity in our messaging. And overall, the community is really stepping up. I'm proud of all you guys. Thank you so much for what you've done. And I'm proud of my engineers who have sacrificed so much for so long to carry us here. This has been truly an amazing experience. There's been some hard days and the criticism is certainly there, but it's all worth it because we really have done something special and it feels that way. And deep down inside, even our critics know it is that way. And it's not all talk. It's real and you can see it. You can install the code. You can look at the code. You can run the software. You can read the papers. They're there. The work has been done. And as I look year by year from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, I'm in awe that we continue to outdo ourselves year after year. And truly 2020 is our year to ascend. And 2021, 2022, 2023, that's the year not to fight the cryptocurrency space. That battle's already over. We'll have won it. That's the year to fight the world and have a very deep philosophical fight of, for the 21st century, do we want to live in a world where the edges are in charge? Or do we want to live in a world where a small group of people get to decide everything about your life from cradle to grave? That's the fight worth having. It has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with the kind of world you want to live in. As a thought experiment, imagine being a billionaire in Russia or China, or imagine being a person of great power and influence in North Korea. No matter how much you achieve, what you have, at any moment, you could find yourself in a jail cell or dead, as the Russian oligarchs who oppose Putin discovered, as the people who oppose Xi discovered in China, and as people who discovered when they ran afoul of Kim Jong-il and Un and Song in the past. So wealth and power really are ephemeral things. They don't mean anything. What matters is the social structures that you yield wealth and power within. And I'd like to live in a world where the fruits of your labors belong to you. We have rule of law. You're allowed to express your opinions without fear of reprisal. And there's consistency and stability in all things. And yet, despite that, we're still able to solve existential problems, deal with crises as they come up, and we're still able to sustain ourselves in a way that doesn't destroy the world or next generation's future prospects. This is what we do and why we do what we do and why we invest so much time and effort. It took a lot of things for us to get here. The internet, the open source software revolution, the Enlightenment. It took a huge amount of risk. It took a lot of courage, especially for the first movers who had no idea if what they were doing was illegal or not. People who printed their own monies tended to not fare so well. But the genie's out of the bottle, and people really clearly understand what's at stake. And in times of a pandemic, really forces us to go back to first principles. So I think we got it right. It's now just doing the work and doing the time. It's going to be a long road ahead. And I hope to be here for many, many, many years on that road until I can't walk no more. But that's a life well spent. And I hope a lot of you guys serve that time with me. It's something that we're all going to remember and tell our kids about. So until next time, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure broadcasting from warm, sunny Colorado. And I'm very excited about the Byron reboot. Install it, play with it. Let me know what you guys think. And April's going to be our great month. And every month thereafter is only going to get better. Cheers.